Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this event today. It's the first family event after Chinese New Year, the New Year of the Ox. So first of all, wish everyone a good year, good health, and also a prosperous beginning of this 2021. And so today the theme is on legal spring cleaning, organizing family finances. In the spirit of New Year, we're having two family lawyers from Jason Legal, Kimberly and Dasse, and Sarah Jane Tasteyre, who will be talking about how to structure or think about matrimonial assets or think about planning how to manage your family wealth and protecting the future of your children from the legal aspect. And they will be joined by Jason Yao of JS Wealth, who is experienced wealth manager and investment manager, who is very experienced in advising couples or families in their family wealth or different sorts of investment instruments and tools to help them think about how to best protect their interests for the future. So without further ado, may I invite the three speakers to just quickly have a brief maybe overview just to share with us any thoughts on how to prepare for the new year for legal spring cleaning. What would you like the participants here to best be aware of when thinking about spring cleaning their own household finances or wealth? Maybe Jason first.
Yeah, sure. I think it's very good timing for this webinar. I think it's a great time of year to do your spring cleaning. I think as we enter the new year, we all have New Year's resolutions to, turn over a new leaf. Last year was an awful year for many people. So, people want to get their finances in order, get their fitness in order, create a to-do list. So it's a great time to get your house in order and tackle your finances. So like with any call to action, we should always start with goals. There's no point in taking any action until we first determine what are your goals. With wealth in isolation has very little meaning. So we always talk about wealth, or I always talk about wealth in relation to a person's life goals. If they understand what they want for the future, if they understand their sort of direction or a game plan, then that determines the parameters for how they make their financial decisions. So, I think it's important even better to sit down with the family, involve the family and talk about, hey guys, look, what are we trying to achieve here? It's important to, I always talk to my clients about looking at the bigger picture, taking a step back from everyday work life. We all have deadlines and working overtime and, working to clients' demands, but actually, what is it all for? Is it just about paying the bills? Is it just about, paying the mortgage, going on holidays? What do we actually want in life? What are we trying to achieve? What makes us happy? So, because we live in a money-orientated world, if we can get our finances in order, we can very much set a plan for our life goals. So it's a great time of year to be doing that.
Wow, thank you, Jason. And the new year is certainly a great time for setting goals. And maybe Sarah and Kimberly, do you have any tips on how couples or families should set goals for themselves or for their partner?
I think it's what Jason has been saying there. It's very important to have this discussion with your family, because it's what often happens is that you have the person in charge of dealing with the finances. Especially dealing with expat families, it's always one person who has all the responsibility for the family, moving abroad with one income, and usually the other partner just thinking, well, she or he is dealing with everything, I'm not going to get into that. So what Jason is saying is really, really important. And I mean, like financial planning, I cannot stress enough the importance of estate planning. With Kimberly, we work a lot on those themes of it's not only about wills, it's not only about the legal guardians for your children. It's like Jason is saying, thinking about the bigger picture. It's not just what's going to happen if I die in terms of finances. For us, it's also what happens if I have a stroke or if I'm incapacitated in any way. I mean, the other issue that we deal with also is anticipated directive with regards to end of life practices. So all these, unfortunately, I would say, it's not always easy to talk about, but it's essential. And then I think, Kimberly, I don't know if you want to add something about that.
What I would add is that I think that financial management, financial planning applies to everybody of all ages, once you reach adulthood, maybe. But, you know, I've got a goddaughter who's amazing at saving money, so maybe it applies to everybody. But I think for purposes of our talk here today, it's important to think of this as, you know, people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. There's never a bad time to start doing this. There may be a better time to have started, but it can never be wrong to begin. And I would like to emphasize young people. You know, when people are getting married, having the conversation before you get married, if you haven't had it or if you haven't made the observations, how does my partner approach money? And is that compatible with me? Because what Sarah Jane and I want to do today is really give Jason just a full opportunity to talk. And we don't want this to be about how am I going to divide my assets for divorce. In a sense, what we're talking about here is divorce prevention. We want people to have these conversations early on so that we know and we're in agreement on how we're going to approach these things.
Yeah, and the point about divorce prevention, I think it's very relevant because for discussing finances between couples or in a family, it's usually quite sensitive. And
Yes.
Yeah, it's very difficult to have this kind of conversation, even though it's very important. And maybe for some people, this kind of conversation may spark some conflicts or quarrels. So yeah, but in a most sensible manner, I think it's quite important for people to think about these ahead rather than before it's too late.
Yeah.
We have already touched a bit about estate planning or financial management or planning for young people. I'm just maybe tune back a little bit and how should we think about investment or financial planning for different age groups, say from the younger people to people who are having an established family?
Yeah, well, I think for graduates, it's a great time to form good habits. You know, you get your first job, you're excited, you suddenly have, well, what feels like a lot of money coming in each month. And you need to form those habits right there and then. It's very easy to be lured into spending that money. You know, we live in a world where there's plenty of temptations and it's very easy to spend the money. So we have to form habits at a young age. Think of it as taxing yourself. You have no choice but to save some of your monthly paycheck, okay, and put that away and build up some cash. Maybe for those based here in Hong Kong, I know a lot of graduates still remain with their parents when they graduate, so there's no rent to pay potentially. So you should be saving that money instead of spending that money. Another advantage why you should start early is the compound effect. I suppose don't really have the ability to talk about the full benefits of the compound effect, but by starting really early, you really have the ability to compound growth that bunch of money. So you build up enough cash for financial emergencies. I would say anywhere between 6 to 12 months of your living expenses. Once you've built up that cash for emergencies, then the fun begins. Then you can really start to begin investing. We have to remember to focus on cost, transparency, and not trying to overcomplicate things. I always try to remind investors that we're not trying to speculate. We're not trying to time the market. We're just buying assets that will appreciate in value, whereby we might receive some income in the form of maybe coupons or maybe dividends. We'll also hopefully benefit from capital gains from holding those assets as well. It's as simple as that.
And how about people who are starting to build a family or looking to, combine their assets in a matrimonial context?
Yeah. So for double income, no kids, we call them dinks. This is the time where, wow, you really feel like you have plenty of money. Two individuals earning money, combining their buying power. And you know, you're in love, you're young, and it's very easy to spend that money. But actually what I find in the presence of 3 women here, actually women are very organized at this stage of their lives. They think ahead towards the future. You know, I'll give you a stat. Probably about 10 years ago, I would say 70% of my clients were male, only 30% of my clients were female. Now, I believe, I haven't, you know, the latest time I checked, more than half of my clients are female. And I believe particularly in this demographic, women tend to think ahead far better than men do. They're thinking about their future, family, kids, property. And it's really important for couples to communicate and talk about finances. They shouldn't avoid it. I saw a statistic a long time ago that money was the biggest reason why couples divorce. It's not affairs or anything like that. It's actually money. So, you know, you have to communicate about money and the future. What are we doing with our money at an early stage? I think that is a solid foundation for a successful marriage for many years to come. So you need to build a plan. I also think that saving during a pay rise is a great time to save. Every time you get that pay rise, you know, you're rising through the ranks, you're getting a pay rise, you can easily save pretty much all of that money because this is new money you've never earned before. So save it now before you become acclimatized to spending that money, before you allocate that money towards, you know, whatever. And before you know it, that money really is building up really, really quickly, and you'll be well on your way to setting the foundations for starting a family, buying a home for yourself, and, you know, you'll get a good head start for the rest of your years.
Yeah. Sarah and Kimberly, from your experience, where do these kind of frictions start, or is money really the biggest problem? And how do they usually resolve it, or how would you usually advise or suggest your clients do when these kind of situations arise, or just how to start talking about finance with your partner?
I'm a huge fan of saying people should talk about this early. And I don't think that there's a lot of behavioral changes that are going to take place. But, you know, if you don't have a good sense of the person that you're dating, how they approach money versus how you approach money, that discussion needs to happen. So what I would say, and this would be a little bit to Jason, you know, if you have people who are past that sort of early stage of their careers, early stage of their lives, they're now looking to have children, they're going to give you a lot of pushback on savings and say, well, it's just a little bit of money, so why should I not buy the nice bottle of wine? It's just, you know, X amount of money. Can you talk a little bit to that, Jason, to get people thinking about that compound factor? Because I have to say, when I was young, I didn't appreciate it like I do now.
Well, I personally think it's a mental state of mind. It's an attitude towards money. You know, I can say for a fact that some of my most successful, or perhaps my wealthiest clients, are not necessarily those who have been, you know, super high earners per se, but they have the right attitude towards money. I'll talk about one client from a long time ago, back in the UK. He has multiple properties. He's never earned a huge amount of income from any employer, but he's always been quite frugal as a person. And over the years, you know, he's in his 50s, late 50s now. He's got about 35 properties in and around the London area. So he no longer needs to work per se. And that's just from buying properties again and again and again. benefiting from leveraging on the market. So you're borrowing to buy that property at fairly low interest rates. It wasn't back in the day. It was 15+% back in the day, but very low these days. And building up that portfolio over time, he didn't become wealthy overnight. It takes commitment, time, and this attitude towards, oh no, I'd rather buy assets that appreciate in value rather than buy assets that depreciate in value. It's shopping in the right way. You're feel free to shop, but buy the assets that make you money, not lose you money.
I think that's also a very strategic approach, and it takes a lot of skill and also just a smart eye, maybe, just to know what is good investment, and it certainly takes time. And for Sarah, maybe because you have experience in advising cross-border marriages and also marriage planning in general, so maybe the conflicts of finances and money may also arise from culture, like cultural differences or different understandings of money, of managing finance. What do you think can couples do to avoid this kind of conflicts, or how could they start thinking about it in the new year?
I think from my experience dealing with expat couples, money becomes a problem when you leave your country and you go and live abroad and you earn more money. That, like Jason was saying, if you haven't had this habit from a young age to save up, you easily can say, wow, I love this new life. I have more money. I can go out. I've got somebody to look after my kids. That's when usually the couple comes to see us for a divorce. In their 40s, new lease of life with more money. So that's what I see. So what I would recommend, if the conversation hadn't occurred at the stage of the marriage with a prenup, for instance, that's what usually sets the conversation going. What kind in France, because that's where I come from, we enter into marriage contract, which is not in the idea of a divorce. It's really, for instance, if you have one of the spouses who are self-employed, choosing a marital contract that will protect the assets of the family will be one of the reasons why to go into a marriage contract. So if the couples haven't done that when they got married, when they're moving abroad, they definitely should have the conversation. You can see more and more, because of the fact that moving abroad means a change in the balance of the couple, because in their home country, they were both working, for instance, and moving abroad means one of them will have to, if they're not lucky enough to both have a job in the new country, one of them will have to stop working for a while. And so this imbalance is created. So now I've heard of clients coming from, not for divorces, but for estate planning. Women have said to their husband, okay, I'm moving abroad with you, and I agree to resign from my job if every month you put into my bank account the amount of my salary that I'm missing out on. And I thought, what a good idea. And you have to have a really strong marriage. But I mean, if the husband is not ready to do that, don't go. So basically that's my experience, because a lot of people, like I say, just move abroad without thinking, just thinking, oh, we're going to earn loads of money. And instead of investing that money, like Jason was saying, because it's the time to buy a property, to all that, the money, the new money, like Jason was saying, you can have new money at every stage of your life. Don't spend that new money. Well, you should travel, but don't use it, on well, it all depends on what you want to do in life, of course. But I would strongly advise to think wisely about when you have a change in your life, like moving abroad.
That's a good example, Sarah. Yeah, I see a lot of couples who've come over to Hong Kong, and they haven't really talked about it much at all. It's amazing. And when issues arise, then that's where, it kind of spills over the pan and things boil over. So good example.
I think also there's a difficulty when you move abroad that you have left kind of your known safeties. So I'm from the US. So for me, it would be the Social Security system. And it depends on how many quarters you've paid into it, whether you're going to get anything out of it. But there's also that calculation of how much have you paid into it and how much you're going to get out of it. And I, of course, don't know how this works in other countries, but you leave that sort of built-in safety to move to another place where you may not have another built-in safety. So I think financial planning is even more important if you decide to sort of pull that theoretical rug out from under yourself and go live abroad. Because I have seen clients who have lived fabulous lives, moving from place to place, living in the best places, and then they start to hit 50 and 60, and suddenly it's like, whoa, wait a second, where did the money go? So for people who are living overseas, Jason, what do you have to say to them in terms of what are their options sort of living in Hong Kong in terms of investments? For Americans, I think it's a little bit tricky because we have a lot of restrictions. So we can take Americans sort of out of the pile there in a sense.
Well, it's a case-by-case basis, I mean, when they come over, they haven't yet established what their living costs are. And because of the newfound income, it's quite easy to go wild, and, like I said, the world we live in is very easy to spend all of it. But the same, same rules apply. We are all limited by our income, and the goal is to not be limited by our income. You can call this retirement, you can call this financial freedom. Retirement kind of denotes the idea of old age, but actually financial freedom, you don't have to wait till 65 to be financially free. You can, with prudent financial planning, you can get there at a much earlier age. Now, obviously, the more you earn, the more ability you have to retire early. So it goes back to my original point. It's about setting your goals. So how long will you be in Hong Kong? Will you be here indefinitely? Now, this will change over time. They might not be able to answer this question straight away, which is why it's important that I build a long-term relationship with my clients, because their goals will be dynamic and evolve over time. Many do decide to go back to wherever they came. Maybe they're here to earn some good money, but eventually go back to where they came from upon retirement. But what does retirement look like? What does the future look like for them? Sometimes we will look at their current lifestyle, the cost of living, so we can extrapolate what they're currently spending and sort of get an idea of what expenses will look like in retirement. Now, we can minus a few liabilities, such as children becoming financially independent. So that's a cost that we can take off. We can take off maybe a mortgage, so they're fully paid off now, and they're now living in their own home without paying any mortgages, so we can take that into account. So living costs should hopefully come down. But the other factor to take into account is that if they're no longer working, they suddenly have a lot more time on their hands. And when you have time, as soon as you leave that front door, money will automatically come out of the purse, come out of the wallet. So there's a lot to think about. And it also depends which country they're retiring. I think for a lot of my clients, they will be in multiple jurisdictions when they retire. They're not going to be in one place. They might be in the UK, Australia, Hong Kong, wherever. So like I said, their goals will be dynamic, and it's important that when we manage the investment, not only it has to be sort of current with the current market conditions. So we have to constantly adapt to current market conditions. We've got to be forward-looking, looking at trends. This pandemic has brought upon, I believe, an accelerated movement towards this fourth industrial revolution, this digitalization of everything, about technology and everything being connected together, cloud computing, semiconductor space, everything like that. So we have to look towards trends, but also the finances have to be relevant to their own circumstances as well, to their own personal goals. So there's two sides to that coin, and we constantly need to evolve as time goes on.
Yeah, apart from relocation that you all have just discussed, what are some other factors that usually will prompt people to review their own financial planning or wealth? Like, for example, children, Jason just mentioned, may over time be taken away as a cost, but when there is children or when there are other responsibilities of the family arise, how should they review or how should they adjust their expectations of finance, or how should they, in legal terms, is the pre or post-nuptial agreement to be reviewed?
Kimberly?
Well, I think that it's important during different milestones that you think about these things. Now, I would say, and this is because I'm a practice matrimonial law, that every couple thinking about getting married needs to consider whether they need a prenuptial agreement. And I think it's important because the prenuptial agreement starts the conversation about money, which I'm a big advocate of. And, you know, a lot of times when young people are young, they don't think of themselves as having any assets, right? But it may be that you have a small little premarital nest egg that you've built and you're in love, right? And so you say, well, we're going to, of course, share this little, you know, $100,000 premarital asset. Well, 5 years later, 10 years later, that little nest egg is going to become a source of dispute, and you're going to spend tens of thousands of dollars trying to defend it if you can. So I think it's very important to have that. And then, you know, as time goes on, children come, we look at that prenuptial agreement and we ask ourselves, is this suiting our needs now? Do we need to get a postnuptial agreement? If you know, as time goes on, people that we love are going to pass away. So as mom and dad pass away, do I need to look at that for myself in terms of my inheritance? Do we then need to look again at what kind of instrument? So that's all in terms of asset protection. I think probably the other side of that would be what Jason would have to say, which is about, okay, I've got, you know, $100,000 coming in from somebody who's passed away. What can I do with that from an investment point of view? Is that correct, Jason?
Yeah. Actually, I have a quick question, Kimberly, if you don't mind. I just want to sort of, things you talked about brought up a few ideas. It's quite common that for a lot of couples, they put many of the assets in one person's name. It can be the person that isn't earning an income, for example. And, you know, like I said, money can be one of the bigger topics that causes divorces. How do we sort of use postnuptial agreements to address this kind of assets?
So with a postnuptial agreement, so, you know, it's going to depend on how the couples have lived their lives, et cetera. But, you know, it's something that you would negotiate and agree with your spouse. I have seen them used a lot when somebody's coming into money. I have seen situations where, let's say a family business is being sold, and so somebody's going to come into a lot of money. So the family will say, look, you're going to have to get a postnuptial agreement so we can protect these assets coming into your possession. But it's something that people would have to sit down and talk about, and they can even agree, look, we have this joint, you know, bank account with you know, $500,000 in it. We can agree that that's either going to be a joint asset, or we can agree, let's separate it and make it into two separate assets. So people can very much negotiate those things. I find that with the postnuptial agreement, it's generally something's happening. There's an inheritance company coming in, and inheritance can be considered protected, but they want extra protection for that. Or there's a family business being sold. But, you know, it doesn't have to be for those reasons.
Okay.
How about in France, Sarah Jane?
Oh, I'm not going to get into all the details of that, but in France, I mean, this is why in France we have what was called matrimonial regime. So when you get married, either you choose one and you go to your notary and you sign a contract, or there's a default marital regime that enables you to know during your marriage how the assets are distributed and what belongs to. So either you have, to give you a broad idea, either you have a community of asset where everything is put together, and usually you have by law everything that's pre-acquired before marriage or inherited is protected. And we even have it in France because we have all those castles and vineyards and family heirlooms. Usually if a spouse is deceased and there's a right for his or her family to get back some of this family heirloom. So you have two systems, either the community or separation of assets, which is like, everything, each of the spouses have own personal property, but there's always also a possibility to have this bubble in between where you could acquire assets together. So we try to find a solution to divide assets without thinking about it. But in practice, if you choose a separation of asset regime, I mean, if you're married for 40 years, do you actually think that every time you're going to buy a television or something, you're going to keep the receipt and say, this is mine? No, in fact, it's difficult. Like, for instance, you have a house and the other spouse pays to redo the what do you call it? Roof. Sorry,
Yeah.
the name. So it can become very, very complicated. But to go back to what you were both saying about what stages in life do you start thinking about finances in another light, I would say that the second half of your life is also a very important time, whether you're going through a divorce. I mean, like Kimberly was saying, in France or in the UK, we have the pension system, the national insurance, that if you live abroad, like Kimberly was saying, you miss out on a lot. So how can we, I was reading an article yesterday about this woman who turned 50 and she'd always been self-employed. Well, from her, a lot of women nowadays, my age, they change careers at 40. They raise their children and then start being self-employed, for instance. So they have this period of their life when they didn't work. Then, if they're lucky, they stay married. So they're still protected in a way by the marital life. But if they get a divorce and they're self-employed and they don't think of extra pension, insurance, life insurance, things like that, they arrive at 50 saying, oh my gosh, retirement age isn't very far. I have nothing. What would you recommend? I'm talking about women, but it can be the case of men also, of course, especially nowadays when it's more and more the case. We see it in Hong Kong, more and more men follow their wives. So what would you recommend? Because this is really, I read this thing that I thought was very good, the roadmap of the second part of your life. And I think it should be of interest for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very humbling moment. If you go through divorce at a quite late stage of your life, and you've been with your ex-spouse for your whole life, and suddenly there's this big gaping hole in your life, and you almost feel as though you're starting from scratch again. I just want to sort of tell a story, and they're not exactly linked, but someone very close to me, a graduate, was, we were just chatting online, and he's a graduate, and being in lockdown in the UK, I suddenly realized that actually he was having a very, very tough time, and over the phone he completely broke down. He just burst out crying. He was probably stuck in lockdown. He was going to go on to do a master's, but that wasn't happening, and he just wasn't motivated whatsoever at all, and he had health issues as well, which may have been linked to his mental issues. And at the end of the day, I told him to focus on always keep moving forward. Never stay still. Think of what's next in your life and what do you want to do, and then just set targets and go and make it happen. And they might seem like mountains to climb at first, but you have to create mini steps for yourself. So he went to see a doctor about his, what he thinks is depression. He had he sorted out his lump on his head. It was benign, so no issues there. And he's now back on his feet. He's eating well. He's exercising. He's just going for walks. He's drinking plenty of water, and he's got his first interview coming up very, very soon. So these are mini victories that he can enjoy and look at it thinking, wow, okay, I'm finally moving forward. Now that's the same with, and I've dealt with divorce in the past before. It's exactly the same. It seems like you're completely lost. You just have to set mini goals for yourself. What do you sit down? What do you actually want? What's next in your life? Okay, there's this big gaping hole in your life. You can't replace that. Actually, create your own path in your life. What do you actually want? And we set up a plan, and we, like I said before, we get the finances in order to help support what you want in life. Because wealth in isolation doesn't mean anything. I promise you that. If we can organize your finances, look at your insurance policies, look at all your different investments that you've got going on. It might seem a mess, but dig it all up and we'll take a look at it. And we'll get you in order so that you can start living the life you want to live. If it means going back to your home country, if it means whatever, then we can do that. But it's those mini victories that we really need to enjoy and always keep moving forward, no matter what.
Oh, hi, thanks, Jason. And we have one question from the audience who's asking if she has made enough money through property investment in Hong Kong, and if she wants to go and retire in Malaysia, in Southeast Asia, would you recommend selling the properties in cash out and enjoy the money? Or would you rather recommend letting the property prices go up and live in Malaysia? Like, what would you suggest usually for Jason?
Well, do you know what? I've actually dealt with this very recently. I've got a client. She's done quite well for herself, and she's bought I think 2 properties in Hong Kong, and one mortgage is paid off, one not quite. But she's definitely sure she's going to go back to Malaysia to retire. She's Malaysian. She loves Malaysia. She's enjoying earning good money here in Hong Kong, and she's sure that she's going to go back. Now, I asked her, so is that the end of Hong Kong? Will you never come back to Hong Kong? Or she said she has friends here. She would like to come back every so often, and she would like to keep one property. So for her, it's about looking at all of her assets. The properties are not her only assets. She has other investments as well. We had a chat about what it would cost to fund her retirement lifestyle in Malaysia. Not a lot, actually. We looked at all of her interests, all of her kind of things that she likes to do in retirement. She likes to travel, and we worked out actually she's got plenty of money without needing to sell both properties. She's going to sell one of them to generate a bit more capital. That's going to go not into the bank. That's going to go into a fairly safe investment that's to generate a steady income for her to fund her retirement lifestyle. So that gives her the ability to buy well, she's got a property in Malaysia already. So she's got a property in Malaysia, and she's going to keep a property here in Hong Kong. She's going to bounce between the two. She sees herself bouncing between the two during her retirement. But we worked out what exactly she needed on a monthly basis to fund that retirement lifestyle. And we worked out if she had enough liquid assets to be invested to generate a yield a retirement income for her retirement lifestyle. And it's as simple as that. It's a case-by-case basis. So it's important that we listen to a client's needs and kind of break it down in financial terms and then set a plan.
Thank you, and hope that helps everyone in their retirement planning. And also just a very quick remark, if anyone else has any other questions for the speakers, Jason, Sarah, and Kimberly, about any matters related to finance or the legal arrangements for marriage, feel free to send in your question. You can unmute yourself and speak aloud, or you can also send in your question via the chat box in Zoom. You can help address that question to the speaker. And back to our discussion about retirement. Oh, Jason, do you want to ask something?
Oh, no, well, I actually have one question that I always try to bring up with my clients, but I always sort of find it difficult because part of my job is to help clients to really think ahead. Now, that's succession planning. And it's a bit of a taboo subject in Hong Kong, and it's always quite difficult to bring up. But whilst it's not necessarily investment, which is what I do, it's a crucial part of financial planning. And I wanted to ask Sarah Jane and Kimberly, what are their tips to kind of encourage clients to really think ahead about succession planning and how to really involve the whole family? And I think that's really important.
Well, first of all, thank you for the question. It will really depends on whether or not you will have, for instance, a family company that that really needs to address. We have a lot, for instance, we have a lot of young French entrepreneurs in Hong Kong. I don't know if you've noticed, or not so young. I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs in Hong Kong. So unfortunately, I have had to deal with probates, cross-border probates for youngish entrepreneurs who, accidents happens and nothing had been planned, and the whole restaurant or just had to, be closed because nothing had been planned. The creditors, asked for their monies and nothing was left. So like you say, it's very important for those young entrepreneurs, they've got the whole life in front of them. So usually they don't think that there's anything to do. They're not married. They don't have any children. Well, that's where the problem lies. They, especially living here and being domiciled in France, you really need to make sure you have somebody who is working with you, who can continue the work if something happens to you, or think about how your family back home will benefit from that company. So whether you being young without a family or middle age, not having a care in the world, those are the discussion you really have to have often. I've had the case just last week. The entrepreneur had told his other shareholders that he wanted his family to continue the family business. But the wife and the children, the first thing they said to me was, "We're selling." And the shareholders are saying, "But that's not what he told us. What do we do?" So that's to answer your question. Planning is essential. So like I said, it goes through a will. I mean, people think it's complicated. It isn't complicated. What is complicated, and that's what I always say, is thinking about it and initiating the difficult conversation. We had a cycle of difficult conversation. This is the difficult part. Drafting and executing a will or a power of attorney or an EPA is not complicated. It's just thinking, who do you want to trust with your company? Who do you think is better suited? You don't want to burden somebody with a responsibility. You often see that in films, but it's in real life. The son who's an artist doesn't want to be burdened with a company. It's all those conversations. I don't know if Kimberly wants to.
No, I absolutely agree with you, Sarah Jane. these are difficult conversations, but these are the very crucial ones, because you give, I mean, I have a small training company, and it's a tiny training company, but it's my training company, right? And once you give life to that, and let's say it's successful, right? You start the restaurant, you start the bar, you start the services organization, and people are interested in wanting that. That has a life of its own. And it takes a lot of love and commitment and time. So I think you talk about it in terms of this entity is almost like a pet, right? I mean, who takes care of this now? But I think one of the tricky things is that question, who takes care of it now, can have a lot of weight in the family, right? What if it's the two brothers who want it, or the two sisters, and the father who's the owner, or the uncle, or whoever it may be, is saying, boy, I think Susie would really be well suited to this, but Bob, no way. So then how do you make those tough choices? And I am a huge fan of talking with people and working things out. Maybe your nephew Bob isn't suited for being the CEO, but maybe he is suited for some other role. Or maybe you talk to him and he says, thank goodness, I don't want anything to do with it, right? And then you can, if you have the capacity, you can also make provisions for people in other ways, right? So I think that you just have to be brave about raising these conversations. In the example that Sarah Jane has given, I think that you need to also have these conversations regarding end of life matters. I mean, we're getting a little bit away from finances here, but Hong Kong has some rules and regulations about this, but it's not like other jurisdictions in terms of end of life planning. But when my very beloved grandmother got dementia, we had to make some very difficult choices. And some things we knew about from her in terms of do not resuscitate. But then there were other decisions. Well, what about giving her medication? What about food? What about water? And we never really talked at that level of detail. And so we made decisions to, prolong her life, but it was very difficult. It would have been easier if she had, not that she burdened us, but if she had told us what her wishes were. We didn't even know that these things were options at the time. So that's why I think it's really important for people to know, for them to express what their wishes are and to put their wishes in writing.
Yeah, I think it's important to get every family member on the same page. You can call it a family governance blueprint if you like, but everyone understands the intentions for the wealth that will be passed on to future generations. Quite often I get retirees, some of my clients who are already retired, they're thinking about the grandchildren, not the children. They're thinking about schooling for the grandchildren. So yeah, it's all about starting that discussion, and what a great time to do it at this time of year for a bit of spring cleaning, getting your house in order, because every time you go to work and you're getting that paycheck, okay, some of this is going towards my future. I've got a plan in place, I've got a direction, it's all in order.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any last thoughts about especially internationally mobile families and couples, especially maybe these few years, a lot of them are thinking about relocation or a more flexible lifestyle. Maybe they are residing in a place and also working remotely for either their own company or for their employer at a distance, or they're quite open to adopt different kinds of lifestyle. So yeah, do you have any last thoughts about how to manage their life more tax efficiently or in a more legally protected way?
Well, I think people should really think about their nuptial agreements, even if things are going well. Statistically speaking, people are likely to get divorced. It's a high likelihood. So think about that and protecting yourself. And also, getting input from somebody like Jason so that they can consider how to invest the pennies that they do save in the smartest way possible from the earliest age possible. I think that even, there should be programs for children to learn how to save and things like that. It's not something that we teach at an early enough age from a formal point of view. It depends on the family. Sarah Jane?
And I would add on what Kimberly says, especially from expat background in Hong Kong for children, it's really, really important, because having moved from Hong Kong to the UK with my young kids, it has opened their eyes, because of programs on telly that really explain, the value of money, why you have to go in different supermarkets to see that, you have different, those things that we don't really see in Hong Kong, or we don't understand because we're foreigners. I don't, but just to say, I think I'm in total agreement with Kimberly. We're in our world of prenups, wills, powers of attorney. You need to do that. It's important. You need to have a will that covers all your worldwide assets for your retirement. But I mean, at the end of the day, do you have the right financial advice and instrument in place to, be transmitted through a will? Basically, make sure, I was listening to a program yesterday about life insurances or all those investments. Make sure that the beneficiaries of all those investments are, you put, for instance, you may have invested in put the beneficiary at the time your partner, you're not married to them. You get separated, you forget, you get married, you have children, and 30 years on, you die, and the beneficiaries is Bob that you've not even heard of. I mean, exaggerating, but just to tell you, I mean, we haven't touched on new families, how to plan for children from a first marriage to protect your new spouse. We haven't touched on sex couples that really need protection, and a way to do that in Hong Kong, for instance, where marriage isn't recognized, is maybe having special investments that what Jason could talk about. But I think there's so many things we haven't had time to talk about. But what's important, in my opinion, is a regular review of all the instruments or investments for, the beneficiary clause. That's so important. And just in life, unfortunately, you have to keep up. If you change countries, you need to, set everything back to zero and see if everything you've got, you've set up is still, is still effective, for other ways to put it. So that's my final words today.
Yeah, how about Jason?
What was the question again? I forgot the original question. I was so lost at the moment there.
Yeah, it's just how can internationally mobile families or couples plan ahead in a nutshell?
I'll just say this part. I know clients that are here in Hong Kong, and I know that they're going back to UK or Australia. Now, there are certain structures that are more tax efficient for these types of expats. For when they take their money back home to Australia or the UK or wherever. So this is why I talk about the idea of thinking ahead. Don't just talk about, oh, I want an investment, I've got some spare cash, I want to grow my money, blah, blah, blah. It's too vague. Let's talk about the future. Are you going to go back to the UK? Are you going to go back to wherever? Where, these sorts of answers will help us make your financial decisions going forward. So from a tax point of view, there are certain structures that are more tax efficient for expats, for those returning to the home country.
Thank you. And just also one last call for any questions from the floor. If you have anything you'd like to raise, or just feel free to throw in any ideas and discuss, you can feel free to unmute and talk. But if not, yeah, we'll keep you posted And I will also send you the contact information of our 3 speakers. If you have any other further queries, you can feel free to connect with them directly. Thank you very much for joining today. And also thank you very much, Jason, Sarah, and Kimberly, for this very informative sharing about family finances. Thank you. Hope everyone have a good new year and we can start having these fruitful conversations now.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.